Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. Tonight, the ABCs of the MPO and the HRPDC. It is an at times confusing alphabet soup of agencies whose work ripples through our lives. They're charged with planning the region's roads. Some, though, don't hold the purse strings. And then there's growing concern that they do much of their work with little public input. And we'll try to sort it all out tonight. While we cannot promise you 3 credit hours in Regional Planning 101, we hope we will at least give you a better sense of what these agencies do and how they do it. Let's start with the MPO. That's the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And the MPO is essentially an organization that the federal government requires for communities of more than 50,000, and that's us. The idea is to make the most of scarce transportation dollars by assuring that they're spent on a plan that actually works across an entire region and has the consensus of local leaders, state agencies, transportation professionals, the port, citizens, and the like. And then there is the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. Now, the HRPDC is a state creation that's charged with planning anything that is bigger than a locality, from emergency response to environmental planning, a little bit of transportation, and the like. It's made up of local elected and appointed officials across 16 localities. Now, you'll notice some overlap here, and that's where it does get a little confusing, especially since the professional staff of the HRPDC also works for the MPO. Don't worry if you're confused. We have just the people tonight to sort it all out for you. Joining us tonight, the chief of 2 for the price of 1, Dwight Farmer, who is the executive director of the HRPDC and the MPO. Joe Frank also serves on both of those bodies. In fact, he negotiated that great 2-for-1 contract in his role. He is also mayor of Newport News. Good to have you with us tonight. And John Moss is with us as well. He is an interested citizen who would like for both groups to be a little more open to the public. Thanks to all of you for being with us tonight. Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting because we had our editorial roundtable program last week, and one of the things that came up in the course of the conversation was this very issue, the MPO and the HRPDC. Dwight, you spent you've probably spent hours and hours with me and others trying to sort all this out for us. Right. And we just tried to do a map that sort of outlined the differences between the two agencies. One of the things that's bubbled up here, though, is the difference between planning and spending and paying for these projects. That seems to be where some of the rub is. Yeah, a lot of folks interchange those words of planning and programming. People talk about the VDOT 6-year plan. It's really a program. A programming document for this 101 course is how you're going to spend money that's pretty certain. It's not guaranteed, but pretty certain. Planning used to be a wish list. Now, in the MPO process, it's mandated that it be fiscally constrained. That is, you have to have reasonable assurances that those long-range revenue streams are also going to be there, or you cannot include them in your official regional transportation plan. And so the federal government says you have to have an MPO, and the MPO has to do the planning for federal money projects. Well, for all regionally significant projects, whether they're local money, state money, or federal money, the federal government says it must be in that MPO approved plan, and that MPO approved plan must be fiscally constrained, not just a wish list. And so the HRPDC comes over that in what way? Well, it used to come over that. Okay. And in this negotiated new reform process, we have a clear distinction between those functions today, and we have for the last 7 or 8 months, where the MPO carries out its function using some of the same staff, focused just on transportation. The Planning District Commission still should be viewed as a regional comprehensive planning organization. For transportation and many other things, as you mentioned. One of the things that's important in terms of distinction is the Planning District Commission is sort of research and advisory in nature. In other words, the Planning District Commission can't come out and say, here's the research, and by the way, we think you should choose option A. That's right. We place all reasonable options on the table, knowing that there are 16 communities and more, even outside of our core district, who are interested in what we're talking about, what information we put on the table. Even the state is interested in, because we touch Richmond figuratively and literally, you know, every day and every week. So, but you can't make those decisions there. Those then have to go back to all of those localities. Is that right? Generally, the Planning District Commission does not. There are some occasions where
the folks like Mayor Frank and others will come together and say, let's see if we can reach consensus, and then come to an agreement. This is our position.
Within that entity.
That time frame.
Mayor Frank, I think it feels a little schizophrenic. You're the mayor, but then you're also sitting on this MPO and the HRPDC. Do you ever feel it's confusing, or does it make sense to you to do it this way?
I have a closet full of hats.
You do indeed, and in so many ways. Yes, you do, with all the organizations you're involved in.
I think for somebody who's been engaged in this for, I think this is the 21st year, it's not so terribly confusing. To the public, it must be just beyond strange. We're trying to work on that. Historically, the PDC has been seen by those who participate, I think, as an umbrella organization of the MPO. You'd have the PDC meeting, it would adjourn, you'd have the MPO meeting, then you'd reconvene the PDC meeting, they'd approve of the work of the MPO, and that would make it a regional policy. The last quadrennial review by the federal regulatory agencies had several critical comments to make, which we took very seriously and took to heart. And so a committee was appointed, which we call the MPO Committee, of which I am chair, to look at the criticisms, to look at how PDC and MPO actually operate and function. One of the things that has been clear to a number of us for a long time is I thought we did an outstanding job, I mean the staff did an outstanding job, in planning and developing the projects and doing the data research and the technical studies that created a transportation system that did a good job in improving mobility in Hampton Roads, including transit modalities as well as road improvements. The problem is we produced the technical document and we hadn't built public support for it in the process. And we weren't advocates for it either. Virginia is, I think most people know, even those who haven't taken the 101 course, is what they call a Dillon Rule state. The Dillon Rule says that local governments have no power to do anything other than what is expressly conferred upon them and authorized by the state legislature. So in that context, the MPO plans road projects, but has no ability, unlike most everywhere else in the country, to fund it. So you have to go and bend a knee to Richmond and ask the legislature to fund it, which up to now they have not done, and it doesn't look like they're going to do it anytime soon either. So you have all this effort and conflict among people of trying to get the projects right, trying to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do, trying to find out how you can pay for the things, and then it gets to Richmond and, you know, it's sort of a dead end. And so the challenge has been to figure out how you restructure the organization to try to do a better job in communicating with the public, getting input from the public earlier on, communicating with members of the legislature.
I think it's probably fair to say that this process by which we came to the six projects that are on the plan right now, professionals would look at that and say it makes sense from a perspective of getting a unified system, but the public doesn't necessarily see that piece of it. And John Moss is with us tonight, and I guess you would be very interested in more exposure to the process.
That's true. The federal process that Dwight talked about does require a greater degree of transparency and public participation than the MPO previously afforded citizens. To both Joe Frank's credit, the mayor, and Mr. Dwight, who's brought a fresh and very welcomed leadership face for both the MPO and HRDC, is welcomed. But you're right, because in the end, it's the customer who pays, who has to be not just educated so they can advocate for what you want, but they can truly communicate what they're willing to pay for and the risk they're wanting to take. And I do think that making the meetings open, I think getting them on cable, we're not there yet, but hopefully we'll be, and using leveraging technology that people can participate remotely versus having to travel to the location, allows and gives the both the elected leadership and the staff leadership what's the gut on the deck plate feel the citizens, what they're willing to pay for, and what congestion they're willing to live with. That is an honest answer.
You know, and that's an interesting point, this issue of what congestion we're willing to live with. And one of the things that's marvelous about all the new technology that's out there now is we're actually, through modeling and simulation and some other techniques, we're going to be able to kind of see what that is in some important respects.
We're getting there. We obviously need some money to revamp what VDOT already has in place. But, you know, one of my just ultimate high order goals would be to have real-time information immediately to the motoring public. And then those folks can either have different expectations than they would have,
right,
or they can make decisions before they even leave home or work or where they shop.
Or I suppose the idea might be you could say in 2 years, if you hit this point on the interstate, you're going to have, your ride home is going to be X amount of time. You willing to do that? Or is there
the simulation work that's being done now is visually demonstrating to us what we're going to see in 5 years, 10 years, even in 20 years. So we not only will know what the numbers are, but we will see what it looks like.
Which I have to say I've always thought would be key to that public conversation. So people really do need to have, you know, it's one thing, and Dwight, I know you're the king of car counting, and I get that, but it's hard to understand thousands and thousands of cars. But boy, when you see that, a whole different deal.
It is true. I think when you have to look at when someone says congested pricing, which is something that makes sense in a lot of models, we'll go, what does the Singapore story tell us?
Yes.
What does the London story tell us? What will you really gain by that? Who does it disadvantage? And I think modeling allows you to do the sensitivity analysis. If you lost a battle group, heaven forbid we lose an aircraft carrier, how does that change our long-term transportation requirements?
If people stay home
That's
one
what
day
a model could tell you.
Yeah.
Well, for example, given the fact that it doesn't appear that we're going to have substantial investment in new road programs for the foreseeable future, and I might add, if you had all the money you needed to do these things today, you'd be talking 10 to 15 years before all of the process took place, the environmental studies, the acquisition, the engineering, and the construction, so you could actually ride on those roads. And then you have a question of, you know, what's the population going to be, what are the ridership, what are the needs. So one of the things that I have suggested, not through the PDC or the MPO, but through the Hampton Roads Partnership, is that they convene the leaders of the largest traffic generators in the region. The colleges, the universities, the military bases, the large manufacturers, the shipyards, and so forth, to see if we couldn't voluntarily, because we have no legal basis for requiring it, voluntarily asking these people to consider staggering the times they open and the times they close. If through that, and you model and simulate that in a very real-time way, if you had that, the data suggests that you could defer the need for all these new road projects for 10 or 15 years, and maybe by that time, you know, find a way to actually pay for what you determine you actually need.
Or there will be technology that will do a new thing.
Yeah. And excuse me one second. One of the things that I think, and it picks up on what John has said, the historic sense of what the role of the MPO was, I think, was more that we ought to be technically competent. We ought to design the program. We ought to have the thing in place. We ought to be able to demonstrate why it's needed and why it works, but not take a political position. We didn't become,
data is data.
Right.
Yeah.
And that if you turn that into advocacy, then you challenge the legitimacy of the technical work because you politicize the process. Well, the fallacy in all that is everything in public life today is public and it's political. And if you do this in the abstract and you don't build consensus for it along the way, you make a mistake.
And so we
we lose the referendum, and we don't have the legislature on board, and they start deciding they should go off and plan their own road projects. Well, of course, that's not their role. And the federal requirements don't allow that. It still has to be approved by the MPO under current federal law. But it allows them to distract the public from the fact that they're not deliberating on how to pay for the projects. They're deliberating on what the projects are, without any discussion about how to pay for their projects either in a meaningful way. So the challenge has been engaging the legislature, engaging the public. What we're trying to do through the work of the MPO committee is we've separated the MPO from the PDC. They have their own agenda, their own minutes, their own work session, website. There's a public hearing part at the beginning of the MPO meetings. The notices and the advertisements and the agendas are now more broadly distributed. Minutes are published. We're just hiring a new public outreach kind of person whose sole job it is to help us understand and implement plans to engage the public from the very beginning and take it to the public, both with technology, but also in person and community groups and community meetings, and trying to make sure we reach every segment of the society. You know, the rich, the poor, the disabled, I mean, bike riders, walkers, everybody who has an interest in mobility needs to be engaged. So we've involved the freight community and the ports, and we'll soon engage the airports and make this much more encompassing. And it's the right thing to do.
And John, does that do it for you, do you think?
In part, because the Port Authority has been given a vote on the MPO, and they're not elected. A number of groups have been giving votes and representation on the MPO, and they
you're
do
concerned
not
about that?
Absolutely. I think they should be non-voting members. There's no citizen voting on the MPO as an interest group, so I think it's certainly, I understand why they would want to be speaking, because they represent a substantial part of the solution, but to give them a vote, the Port Authority or the Hampton Roads Partnership or any other group, and Virginia Beach gets one vote, I don't think we should give the special interest groups votes. How do we decide which groups should be voters? So we don't agree with that part.
Well, you know, we've deliberated all of that and had certainly, I think, strong reasons for what we've done. We are creating a citizen advisory group. The chair of that will have a place at the table, but as John points out, not a voting role. The port was given a vote because we are hopeful that with all the money they generate, they may become a financial contributor in some way to some of the road projects. But they are such a huge economic piece of the economy of the region and the Commonwealth, and such a large stakeholder. I mean, we've given transit a vote, and VDOT and Virginia Public Rail. So those who have, I mean, we call them stakeholders, and some of the folks in John's group refer to them, I think, as
special interest groups,
yes. So, you know, that's a discussion.
So that's a discussion that's ongoing then.
Yeah.
True, but I think it's not like we have animosity here. It's just representing that a group like HRT that gets money from the public now gets to vote on the things that give them money. There's an inherent conflict of interest when you can vote yourself a project.
Yeah.
But it doesn't keep us from finding common ground and doesn't keep us from solving problems.
And this has been a long time coming. We should point out, and should probably give some credit to the Future of Hampton Roads organization, because they also were a group that looked at, and my goodness, how they did this, I don't know, it just makes your head explode to look at all this stuff for too long. I hate to say it, but those folks really put the pen to the paper, looked through all that material, and sort of came up with some thoughts and looking at different options around the country, which I suspect is, to some degree, why we are now talking about the value of the public comment in this process.
Yes, part of the reform process that Mayor Frank's committee has moved forward on is a best practices report by a national consulting firm using local money, not using the grant money that comes through the MPO program, but rather self-paid for to reflect inward on our process. And it's been enlightening. There's a significant set of recommendations of not standard practices, and I charged those folks, as did the leadership on the board, not to come back with standard practices, but tell us truly what are the best practices from around the country. And citizen participation, the building of consensus, the full airing, the interchange between elected officials and citizens and technical folks can all come together and see where we agree, see where we disagree.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, if you didn't figure that out after '02, after the referendum in 2002, when it was so clear that One set of the community was just really bought into the idea. The other set didn't buy into it, and there wasn't a lot of checking back and forth.
Well, you know, the fascinating thing about that has been, and always fascinating to me, there's never been a problem with consensus in developing the projects. It's when you go to the public and tell them you have to pay for it that it becomes controversial.
I don't know if that's
But
totally
Mayor Frank,
true.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, in terms of the 6 projects, one thing we're hearing now is, and it's reflective in the conversation about the HRBT. You know, because there are a lot of folks now, including some Peninsula legislators, some of your colleagues, who are saying that Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel has to be in there.
Well,
or it ain't going to fly.
You know, I mean, all of that is true, and what I said was, I think, my sense of you know, the practicality of it. But we had on the 6 projects, as I recall, it was sort of unanimous at the MPO when it was adopted. I don't think there was any objection, and I think every one of the 16 participating community elected boards and councils supported it. Every one. I don't think there was a single community that didn't, because it was an abstract plan. When it went to the community with specific
dollars and cents
and this kind of revenue stream and that kind and the other, that's when you started to see.
I'm not going to pay that $2 toll.
Yeah, and that's when you really started to see opposition building. And part of it is from what John says. We didn't do what we should have done to build consensus for the projects themselves. They sort of appeared, so to speak, one day, and all of a sudden people, including members of the legislature, were asked to pay for it. And, you know, people said, I think rightly, you know, why are you asking us to pay for something? We didn't have anything to say about what was. And that's, I think, John's point more than anything else.
Well, a little bit more than that, I think, because I think the public would have come to a different set of projects because they would have been looking for traffic congestion where they live. And that set of projects did not provide meaningful traffic congestion relief. It had a different set of criteria.
But it also would have afforded, would it not, a conversation about one thing, and boy, we have like 10 seconds left here, that Dwight has talked about before, which is the fuller conversation about what happens if you stay home one day a week, to your point. What happens when the Navy shifts and staggers things a little bit? You know, that's another piece of this conversation.
The non-material solutions to our problem.
It's going to be so fascinating with to see where we go with this, because one thing that's for sure is that when you have no money on the table, you got to get real creative real fast, and that seems to be where we are right now. We will come back to this for your 102 coursework. And I want to thank all of you for being with us tonight, because I think it's very important but very tough to get through. And so thank you for your attention, and thank you for your brilliant explanations. And I'll be back in just a moment with a final thought. 2 weeks ago, we introduced you to members of the lost class of 1959. These folks were seniors during that tumultuous year that began with padlocked school doors in September as the city of Norfolk opted to close in a show of massive resistance rather than comply with court-ordered integration. The school stayed closed for about 5 months, and the result was tremendous pain for the 17 African-American students and for the lost class of 59, hundreds of whom never came back when the schools reopened. The mail we received demonstrates that there are still many stories to be told of that time. We heard from Taylor Greenberg from the Maury class of 59, who wrote, "The greater issue is why our parents couldn't have acted out more forcefully against the machine. Your mention of Mr. Boswell's experience certainly alluded to the intimidation exerted on anyone who did speak out. There were other white citizens who were hurt by economic boycott because they did act or speak out. Maybe someday someone will give those folks the posthumous recognition they deserve. They actually closed our schools, and we did not stand up quickly and forcefully enough." And Willard Frank of Norfolk thought we should have focused more attention on the Norfolk Committee for Public Schools. He wrote, "This is the grassroots effort that built momentum to break the fear in the white community, open the political arena to citizen involvement, change white attitudes towards segregation, and to create and fund the court case that opened the schools. The committee has long since disbanded, but Mr. Frank notes the significant involvement of the Unitarian Church, Forrest and Edith White, Ellis James, and many others who were equally courageous and responsible for the change in attitude and politics that came out of the fight against massive resistance." We should note that Inauguration Day last week was the 50th anniversary of the court case ordering the schools to be reopened. It is amazing what can happen when we open the door. Thanks for watching. As always, we want to hear from you. You can write to us at 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk, Virginia, 23508. You can call us at 889-9437 or email us at whatmatters@whro.org. And we invite you to check out our website at whatmatters.tv. And that's where you can sign up for our weekly e-bit, which will let you know what we're working on for the coming week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.